Welcome back to the Naxxramas Raid Guide. In this video I'll be covering Thaddius. He's the final boss of the Construct Quarter, also known as the Abomination Wing. My name is Ciderhelm from TankSpot, and like all these videos, they're intended for full raids rather than just for tanks, so feel free to share it with your guilds. Now I've just run up Stalag, and shortly you're going to be able to see Fugan over on the other side. These are two mobs that are going to be on their respective platforms, and they need to stay on those platforms, so you'll need to divide your raid accordingly. Now the reason they need to stay on their platforms is because if for any reason they decide to go to the other side, such as they're aggroed on someone on the other side, which should not happen, or if someone's down at the bottom of the ramp, or if people are trying to run away, they will gain a massive damage buff and will wipe your raid almost immediately. That said, it's a fairly easy process to get people, or to get both of these to actually stay on their platforms. The tanks are constantly being switched back and forth like you're seeing. I'll explain that in a minute, but first I'm going to go ahead and explain the class division, or the party division, what you're going to want to do here. You need to bring both of these down at the same time. They need to die within just a few seconds of each other. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and get your about an even balance of DPS on each side. That may, in some cases, depending on how many healers you have, that may mean having more DPS or more players on one side than the other. The tank only needs one healer during this process, so that's not too much to worry about. And as you're going to see, the tanks are always being switched side to side here, which can mean that they need to be healed up when they get to the other side. It depends on how much damage they've just taken. It shouldn't be a large issue, especially in the 10-man, but it is something to keep in mind. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to overvent, make sure that people are talking with each other and they have a good idea of when these mobs are going down. Because, they do need to be going down at the same time. These are a quick check on the coordination of the raid group you have, but there's going to be quite a bit more coordination coming up here. Now, one of the bosses you may be aware of is the first boss in Heroic Mechanar. That, with the polarization shifts that occur there, that's something you're going to want to keep in mind from Thaddius, or for Thaddius once you get to him. It was originally pulled from Thaddius, and momentarily these mobs will be coming down, so I'll go ahead and explain it once we get up to that point. Just changing my combat log to my combat log here on my interface. As you can see there's a little bit of a gap between this platform and the final platform off to the right of the screen here. And that's something you're going to need to keep in mind as these mobs go down. You are going to have to jump over it. It's pretty common for people their first time there to miss a jump. You don't want it to happen to most of your raid. They will have to swim back through this ooze in the ground, and they'll have to run all the way back up and jump down and potentially take a polarization damage through the course of this, so you do want people to be aware of these ledges, and I'll be showing that off in just a few seconds here. It looks like these mobs are going down. Got a jump right there. Miss a jump. It looks like we have one person who does miss a jump, and they are going to have to swim back. Now here's Thaddius. He starts off in this position. There are two ways to do this encounter. I'm going to show you the 2-point strategy. I have a 4-point strategy from the original 40-man. There's going to be a video, and it's going to be embedded in the same thread where I contain this on TankSpot. So if you're watching this on YouTube or FileFront, go to tankspot.com if you want to see the 4-point strategy, which will be important for raids. Now one thing you'll notice, if you look over to the right of my screen, I do have a debuff. The debuffs are on the left side of this, of my screen. That debuff is a minus sign. That means I have a negative polarity shift, or I have the negative debuff on me. I need to be around other people who have that negative debuff, and they need to be hopefully close enough to me. In this case, the hunter may be too far away. Hopefully everybody is close enough that we're all gaining this buff from each other, because the debuff right below the negative sign is another debuff, which is technically a buff actually, which is a major damage increase, which is necessary to beat the enrage timer here. Now you've just seen me switching sides a few times, and you're seeing other people switch sides here too, and this is what I mean by a 2-point strategy. When I'm talking about the buff that's occurring by having the, in this case I have the positive charge, when I'm talking about the buff that's occurring in this encounter, the reason it's a debuff is because it will kill anyone who does not share that debuff with you. If they don't share it with you, you're going to stand around them, you're going to deal a lot of damage, you are potentially going to wipe the raid, or at least damage it a lot. You can slide by a little bit if someone doesn't understand what's going on. The damage can be healed through in the 10-man encounter. It's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but you can just give them a quick warning over vent, which we had to do here. Give them a quick warning over vent, switch to the other side, you're on the wrong side, make sure that you don't do it again. You do have to keep a little bit of distance. Obviously the tank and the melee on the other side do have to keep enough distance where they're not charging each other, so that's something to keep in mind too. And where you see the Resto Druid, the tree over here, kind of running on the far side here, when they came in and when anybody comes in, if they've fallen into that goop and they have to run all the way around, jump down, make sure they do not run into either side because they will take the damage. I'm not positive they'll deal the damage, but they'll definitely take the damage from other players. So the ideal place for them to be is actually right along the right side edge there. Okay, now how do we actually determine which side people are going to? Notice how I have the positive debuff now. In this case, if you were looking at this from the door entrance, the positive, the door being all the way over to the left, if you were looking at Thaddius while he's in his frozen state, before you've taken on Stalag and Fugan as a raid, you want to let people in your raid know, to the right is going to be the positives, to the left is going to be the negatives. Anytime that debuff changes, and it's going to be very obvious when he does it because he does a polarity shift ability right there. Anytime that changes, you go immediately to the other side. You need to focus. Don't focus on damage. Don't focus on anything else. Don't focus on your abilities. Don't focus on getting a cast off. Just focus on your debuffs. I'm sure there will be mods developed very quickly. There were mods developed for the 40-man version of this, so there should be mods coming up pretty quick for the 10 and 25-man versions of this, if they're not already out. But as it stands, it's very easy. Just watch your debuff. When that polarity shift is occurring, like right there, watch it and move immediately. You see a bunch of people moving here. Now, there are a few different strategies to make this better. If you're dealing with Australian latency, this is a little bit easier on the latency. It's not so much about instant kill as it used to be, where we had Australians in particular playing on US servers were taking huge latency hits. I had a very difficult time with this encounter and had a very difficult time with a Huygen as well. This has been adjusted a little bit for this, but if you're dealing with oceanic players, or if you're dealing with any kind of serious latency issues, you can create a circular rotation where you're not running through like most of us are, where you actually do a full circle. So if you're actually changing from positive to negative, you're always going to go to the right of him, and you'd actually move him as a tank. You would move him more towards the middle of this platform rather than right next to this centrifuge to his right, where the screen is facing now. So if you were moving from positive to negative, you would circle around to his right and come around the rear. If you were moving from negative to positive, you would again circle around to your right, but it would create a full circle, so nobody's in danger of hitting each other through this process. As a tank, you're generally going to need to run through anyway, just because of what you're doing, but also as a tank, if you're at this point, and if you have a good understanding of tanking, you're probably on your game enough that you're going to be darting right through there anyway, hopefully. You do want to keep him debuffed. His damage can be substantial through this. It can be rough on healers because the healers are constantly in motion. Obviously, this gives an advantage if you can roll hots. If not, it can be rough. So, as a tank, make sure your debuffs are on there if necessary. This is one of the more complex encounters, so make sure you ask questions if you need to on TankSpot.com, through our forums, through our community, or obviously to any of the other experienced raiders here. This is definitely something where people need to be on their game or you will not get through it. It's more about complexity rather than about DPS races. Thank you for visiting and thank you for watching.